Noth Clipper, hi friends. Darth Momo here. And it's already been a week since the Bad Batch ended. And I've got to be honest, I'm already kind of missing it. I was a little bummed when I realized I wasn't going to have a Bad Batch episode watch this week, which don't get that confused with me being hooray it's or like sad wishing it just never ended, because I'm happy it ended. It ended, I thought, at a pretty good spot. And on top of that too, I'm somewhat impatient, so it's nice to have the ending already. um but one thing I thought I'd like to do is, just now that we have the whole season or the whole series and it's complete, let's look at it. All three seasons, how do they work in the long run? And some positives, some negatives, what I think could have been done better, what I think was done well. So the Bad Batch, 21 to 24, is now complete. 3 seasons, and that would be 47 episodes. I give it a 7 out of 10 overall. I did a ranking video that recently came out, and where I ranked all of the Star Wars shows and movies. And if you haven't watched it already, I ask and suggest simultaneously that you go check it out. But I had recorded that about halfway through season 3 of Bad Batch, so I didn't have the final episodes in, but I predicted that it probably wouldn't change my score, and I agree with that. I still give it a 7 out of 10. It wasn't anything amazing. It wasn't anything special, but it wasn't awful. It wasn't bad. What do I think that the Bad Batch did well on? I think the characters are all more or less pretty likable. Season 1, Hunter was my favorite character. Season 2 and 3, Crosshair was my favorite character. I think they're probably the best two characters in the show. That's my opinion, though. I liked Echo. I liked Tech. Wrecker and Omega, I don't like them, but I wasn't annoyed by them. I never was really irritated with them, or was like, oh, I just get these guys out of here. Like, I didn't mind them. I was just indifferent with them, which I would obviously say that's a lot better than me being irritated by them. And I thought Wrecker was annoying a time or two in his Clone Wars arc. But yeah, all the characters I thought were still likable. And I would say, as time went on, like, I like Wrecker, I like Omega as time went on. Initially, I didn't really care for him. So I think it does well with the characters. And I think there's some solid arcs in there too, especially Crosshair. His arc in season 2 and 3, and even his arc in season 1. I enjoyed those very much, and I think looking back on it overall, his arcs were probably my favorite out of the arcs that the characters went through. I mean, Tech's death was, I gotta say, I mean, I wouldn't say it was the saddest death for me experiencing it, but it was most certainly shocking, and it wasn't something I expected. There's definitely some writing beats in this show that I thought were really well done, such as in season 3 when they bring Admiral Rampart back into the show. I was impressed. I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this. This is fun. And likewise, I guess you could say with Admiral Rampart back in season 2, when Palpatine just came out and kind of, even though the Bad Batch and Rex thwarted Palpatine's plans, he just popped out and he's like, no, I'm 10 steps ahead of you. And he pulled out a backup plan and worked what they did to his advantage. And I thought that was really well done. I loved Crosshair's whole approach with the Bad Batch once they captured Hunter in season 1, and his whole meeting in the training squad. Yeah, overall, I thought this had some pretty solid writing beats. The music, I still think the music is pretty well done. I like their theme. I like the sacrifice Tech theme. I thought they had a pretty solid finale too. I mean, it wasn't what I was hoping for. I was hoping for a Rogue One style ending. I know a lot of people were. But that being said, like, it's still easy in this case to say, this wasn't what I wanted, but it was still a solid finale. It wasn't an amazing finale, I thought, but it was still a pretty solid finale. So those would kind of be some things I thought it did well on. What did I think it could have improved on? I think it could have very much trimmed the fat. So looking back on it, let's say even just years down the road, or shoot, maybe when I've got a kid 10 or 15 years down the road that I can watch all these with. Do I think that it will be as much of a chore to watch it all? No, I don't think so. I have a friend, Isaiah, that watched Rebels and Clone Wars back in 2018 and 2019. So he obviously was able to watch the complete shows, and he told me it was a lot easier to watch them and binging them. Whereas if it was week to week, he's like, I don't know if I could do it with some of them. And I completely agree. I think week to week it was a little frustrating, especially in season 2. There were some moments where I think of one was when they were in that mining on that mining planet and they were trying to get out of there because the kids stole their ship. That very much upset me because it was just like, I don't mean to say that to sound like a whiny fanboy, but I guess it was frustrating because it felt like we were in the second half of the show or the season now. Things were going to start ramping up, and it didn't. And I would say I had a similar issue with season 1 too, where after the Ryloth episodes, we were in the final 4 episodes of the show, and Admiral Rampart basically told Crosshair, like, hey, I'm personally tasking you. Hunt these guys down now. So I thought, okay, we're in the final stretch of the season. We're just going to amp it up from here. And I enjoyed the Ryloth episodes. And then the next episode was about that Deveronian guy that takes over Sid's place. And I was like, are you kidding me? Is this really what we're doing? And then we got into the good stuff, the last 3 episodes. So I think very much this show could have trimmed the fat. There was definitely some episodes that I think they felt dragged out. I would say an example of this would be the very first episode of season 3. Watching the first 3 episodes of season 3 together was fine, but when you take them episode by episode, the first episode kind of dragged out a little bit. Maybe a better approach would have been combining the first 2 episodes, so you have the slower but more essential build-up aspects of the Tanta's story with Crosshair and Omega, intermixed with some maybe not as necessary, but some more action-focused segments with Hunter and Wrecker. The other thing I think that this series had some issues with is some plot points. I think season 3, I think, definitely had some focus. It had a goal, and it continuously built to that goal. Season 1, I wouldn't say there was necessarily a goal, but it was much more character driven. So there was a lot more to keep the plot going. But season 2 felt a lot more aimless. And I think part of that is they introduced plot points that I think ultimately, looking back on the show, went nowhere. You could look at Sid, right? Sid wasn't just a one-off character, someone who was in an episode or 2. Sid was someone who was in half of season 1 and almost the entirety of season 2. And where did that end up going? Like, she betrays them, and that was just it. And it's like, okay, I get you want to teach, you could look at that as a lesson with Omega, right? But they didn't really convey that if that's what they were going for. And then also with Sid, it was like, she just disappeared, and it's like, okay, well, all those filler episodes that were focused on missions for Sid, what was the point of all those? You could easily look at, Echo. It's like he just leaves the show and halfway through season 2, and that's it. Like, he's in a couple episodes throughout the rest of the show, but it was like, well, what was, he was a main character, and he's just kind of like thrown off halfway through because they kind of didn't know what they wanted to do with him, so they just wrote him out of the show, and he only comes back for a couple episodes. So I think those would, or Commander Cody, he's just thrown in, and I'm not saying that would have been a thread that necessarily needed to be wrapped up, but it just felt like, oh, he went AWOL. But then he's not with Rex's group, so it's like, well, what happened to him? Or the Asajj Ventress thing. I don't think they should have brought back Ventress. It just kind of felt like, okay, I know they said on a blog on StarWars.com that maybe 15% of the people who watched the show read or even heard about. I know they said they're going to do some future stuff with her, but to me, it's like, why'd you even bring her into the show? You literally resurrected her, didn't explain how, and you just brought her back for ultimately an episode that if you removed, you didn't end up needing. And I would think that's my strongest criticism Going into this kind of goes back to the trimming the fat point I made a few minutes ago. I think ultimately that is my biggest criticism and suggestion for future shows going forward. I know sometimes it could get to the point where the shows and the seasons get so short with some of the live action content that we're like, why even make that a show? Why not just make it a movie? But that being said, if you're going to tell a story with 16 or a season with 16 episodes, try to make them all count. Otherwise, yeah, maybe cut it down a little bit, especially with this mold. When you come out with Obi-Wan Kenobi, that's 6 episodes, or Book of Boba Fett, that's 7 episodes, don't tell me you're required to have 16 episodes in the Bad Batch, especially when Clone Wars had 12. And the reason why I would say to that is, look at the last 2 animated shows, The Bad Batch and Resistance. I think they both follow a pattern. Rebels is a show that I think does a very good example of not being filler. Even the episodes that weren't necessarily bangers still either contributed to characters or the overarching plot of forming the rebellion. I know there was an episode or 2 in there that tied together in Rebels in Season 3 about getting proton bombs, which, yeah, that contributes to growing the Alliance. You may say that's fill or whatever, but there was also some character work that was done there too. And I would argue that when it comes to Rebels, there was maybe one episode, Season 3, Episode 19, that you could remove and not miss out anything. Otherwise, Rebels was essential. Every episode led into either a major plot throughout the show, or it came back in at the finale. I think the biggest example is the Space Whales, the Purrgil. That was an episode that even I was like, are you kidding me? What are we doing here? This is filler. But it all ended up coming back in the finale. Whereas with both Bad Batch and Resistance, no, and I think they're leading continuously going at this point where they have a 22-minute episode and you have about 5 minutes of plot that's actually relevant, and by doing that they say, well, see, it's not filler. And I would say, guys, you got to stop doing that because it's getting old real fast. There's a lot of Bad Batch. I think there's at least an episode in each season, maybe arguably 2 episodes that you could have trimmed you could have cut out. I think with Season 1, I easily could think of 1 episode you could have cut out. With Season 2, I could think of at least 2 or 3 that you could have cut out. And with Season 3, if you remove the Fennec episode and the Ventress episode, you don't miss anything. In fact, I would almost argue that they flow nicer. And then you could look at the first episode and I think it was the 10th episode, the one with the kids. You could have trimmed the fat on those easily. Like, yeah, was those essential to the plot overall? Yes, but could you have done that in half the time? I think easily so, and not drag down the story. So that would be my biggest constructive criticism going forward for Star Wars shows in general, and something that I think the Bad Batch could have done better on is trim the fat. Trim the fat. I would ultimately, I heard this once on a YouTube video, I think the biggest compliment an artist could get is wanting, or their audience wanting more. And I would say it's arguably, or it's a lot better to leave your audience wanting more versus burning them out. I would much rather have had 12 episode seasons that told a tighter story versus 16 episodes, or in Season 3's case, 15 episodes that had a couple filler episodes that left me going, what are we doing here, guys? So that's all in all my thoughts on The Bad Batch. I give it a 7 out of 10. It wasn't anything amazing. It didn't reach the highs of Clone Wars or Rebels for me, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't offensive. It wasn't frustrating. Well, it was frustrating in the filler sense, but it wasn't, I didn't think it had a bad plot. It was, all in all, there was some great episodes, there was some good episodes, and there was some meh. Season 1 had some lows and some highs. Season 2 was very meh, and some good episodes at best, and Season 3, I would say, was pretty solidly good, consistent. But that's my thoughts on The Bad Batch. I'm interested, I should say. I don't want to say excited, but I'm interested to see what they're going to do with the next animated show, because truthfully, I don't know what they're going to do. My guess would either be pre-Phantom Menace, or they're going to go post-Return of the Jedi. Not in the Mandoverse timeline, maybe some point in between, about halfway through between the 6 and 7 timeline mark. But we'll see. Nevertheless, thank you guys for joining in. Darth Momo out, and may the Force be with you. Always. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, comment down below and hit that like button. Oh, and check out some of my other videos. I'm sure you'll find them a delight.